Emma had never been this excited for a family trip before. The Maldives. Just saying the name out loud gave her a sense of wonder. For months, she had envisioned herself walking along the white sandy beaches, feeling the warm sun on her skin, dipping her feet into the crystal-clear turquoise waters. It felt surreal that she was finally going to experience it in reality. For weeks, she had meticulously planned everything. She had spent hours researching the resort, looking up activities they could do as a family, and even picking out the perfect beach outfits. She had double-checked her packing list at least 3 times, making sure she had everything: swimsuits, sunscreen, sunglasses, her favorite summer dress. Her suitcase was packed and standing by the door. She had gone to bed early, setting 2 alarms to ensure she wouldn't oversleep. The flight was scheduled for the next morning, and she didn't want to risk anything that could make her late. But when Emma opened her eyes the next day, something felt off. The first thing she noticed was the silence. Usually on travel days the house was buzzing with activity. Her mom yelling at her dad to hurry up, her dad complaining about how early it was, her younger brother running around excitedly. But now the house was still. She frowned, reaching for her phone to check the time.
9:47 Uhr morgens.
Her heart dropped. That couldn't be right. She bolted upright, her mind scrambling to make sense of what was happening. The flight was supposed to be in the morning. Had she slept through everything? Had her alarms not gone off? She grabbed her phone and scrolled through her messages, searching for anything from her parents. Then she saw it. A text from her mom sent at 6:30 a.m. "Sorry, sweetie. We didn't want to deal with your drama, so we told you the wrong flight date. We've already left. Enjoy your time at home." Emma blinked, rereading the message, convinced she had misunderstood. What? Her fingers trembled as she read it again. It made no sense. Her parents, her own parents, had lied to her? They had left without her. A cold wave of disbelief washed over her, followed by a rush of panic. This had to be a mistake. Maybe it was a cruel joke. Maybe they were still at the airport, expecting her to call so they could tell her to hurry. Maybe. No. She checked her family group chat. No missed calls. No messages. Just radio silence. Her stomach twisted into a painful knot as reality set in. They were gone. They had left her behind, intentionally. Heart pounding, she jumped out of bed and ran downstairs. The house was eerily empty, the kind of emptiness that felt too deliberate. She checked the kitchen. No breakfast plates in the sink. No half-drunk coffee cups on the counter. No signs that anyone had been there that morning. She rushed to the garage and flung the door open. The car was gone. Her breathing became uneven. She ran back inside, searching for more clues, something, anything, that could prove she was misunderstanding this situation. But as she walked around, she started noticing the small things that confirmed the truth. The suitcases that had been stacked by the door the night before? Gone. The passports that had been in the drawer? Gone. The travel itinerary that had been on the fridge? Gone. They had planned this. They had planned to leave her behind. Emma sank onto the couch, gripping her phone tightly as a mix of emotions swirled inside her: confusion, anger, hurt. Mostly hurt. Why would they do this? Why wouldn't they want her to come? Had she done something wrong? She replayed the last few days in her mind, searching for signs. Sure, she and her mom had argued about her packing too much stuff, but that was normal. And yes, she had complained about waking up early, but so had her dad. Nothing had happened that was serious enough to justify this. Unless her mother's words in the text lingered in her mind. "We didn't want to deal with your drama." Emma felt her throat tighten. Was that it? Did they think she was too much of a burden? Too annoying to take on vacation? Her vision blurred with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Not that they could see her now anyway. She forced herself to think logically. There had to be a way to fix this. Maybe she could book a later flight and meet them there. Maybe she could call the airline and explain the situation. Maybe. She stopped mid-thought, realizing something devastating. She had no money for a ticket. Her parents controlled her bank account. She was still in college and only had access to the monthly allowance they transferred to her. Even if she somehow managed to book a flight, where would she stay once she arrived? They had the hotel reservations, the credit cards, everything. They had made sure there was no way for her to follow them. A fresh wave of anger bubbled up inside her, overriding the sadness. This wasn't just about a missed vacation. This was a betrayal. A calculated, intentional betrayal. She opened her messages and typed furiously. I can't believe you did this to me. How could you just leave me behind? What is wrong with you? She hit send. No response. She called her mom's phone. No answer. She tried her dad. Straight to voicemail. Emma clenched her fists. She wasn't going to let this go. They couldn't just do this to her and expect her to act like nothing had happened when they got back. Fine. If they wanted to leave her out, she would make sure they regretted it. Emma sat on the couch, staring blankly at her phone screen. It had been hours since she had discovered the truth, that her parents had intentionally lied about the flight date and left her behind. She had sent multiple texts, called both of them several times, and even tried messaging her younger brother, but there was no response. Nothing. It was as if they had vanished off the face of the earth, happily enjoying their tropical vacation, while she was stuck at home, trying to make sense of their betrayal. Her mind raced, flipping between shock, anger, and a deep, gut-wrenching sadness. She had never felt this disposable before. Like she was an inconvenience, an afterthought. It wasn't just about missing the Maldives. It was the fact that they had made a conscious decision to exclude her. She wasn't even worth an argument, a discussion, or an explanation. They had simply decided she was better off left behind. But why? Emma tried to replay every interaction she had with them in the past few weeks. Had she done something wrong? Had she annoyed them that much? Sure. She had argued with her mom a few times while packing, but that was normal. It wasn't like she had thrown tantrums or done anything extreme. We didn't want to deal with your drama. Her mother's words echoed in her head, stinging worse than she wanted to admit. What drama? Had they really seen her as such a burden that they preferred to go without her? The more she thought about it, the more her hurt turned into anger. She stood up abruptly and started pacing the room, gripping her phone so tightly her fingers ached. This wasn't just some petty decision. This was calculated. They had deliberately lied to her, planned everything in advance, and then ignored her once they had left. They weren't just avoiding confrontation, they were avoiding accountability. She opened her messages again, and reread the text she had sent earlier. I can't believe you did this to me. How could you just leave me behind? What is wrong with you? No response. She scrolled further down and started typing again. At least have the decency to answer me. You owe me an explanation. Send. Nothing. She clenched her jaw. Fine. If they weren't going to answer her, she would make sure someone else knew about this. She opened the family group chat, where they normally shared pictures, plans, and updates, and typed out a message. Hey everyone. Just so you all know, Mom and Dad lied to me about the flight date and left me at home while they went to the Maldives. They didn't even tell me until after they had already gone. No explanation. No apology. Just gone. I have no idea why. So if anyone talks to them, maybe ask them why they decided their own daughter wasn't worth bringing on a family trip. Her finger hovered over the send button. Would this make things worse? Probably. Did she care? Not anymore. Send. A few seconds later, the read receipts popped up one by one. Then the responses came. Her aunt was the first to reply. Wait, what? Are you serious? Her cousin. That's messed up. Why would they do that? Then a flood of reactions: shock, confusion, outrage. Everyone was asking the same question Emma had been asking herself all morning. Why? Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a text. It was a call from her uncle. Emma hesitated for a second before answering. Emma? What's going on? Your parents really left you behind? His voice was filled with disbelief. Yeah, she said, her voice tight. They told me the flight was tomorrow, but they left this morning. I woke up and they were already gone. A long pause. And they haven't given you any reason? No. Another silence. Then a sigh. I don't even know what to say. That's cold. Are you okay? Emma swallowed hard. Was she okay? Not really. But admitting that out loud felt too vulnerable, too raw. I don't know, she admitted. I don't get it. I keep thinking there must be some reason, but nothing makes sense. I get it, her uncle said. Listen, I'll try to get in touch with them. Maybe they'll answer if it's me. Emma doubted it, but she nodded anyway. Okay, thanks. After hanging up, she sat back down, staring at her phone as more messages poured in. The news was spreading fast. Then finally, after hours of silence, her mom's name popped up on the screen. Emma's pulse quickened. She didn't hesitate to answer. What the hell, Mom? She snapped the second she picked up. You're finally answering me now that everyone knows what you did? Her mother sighed heavily on the other end. Emma, we didn't want to deal with this drama while we were on vacation. There it is again, Emma spat. Drama? What does that even mean? What did I do that was so terrible you couldn't stand being on a plane with me? You always make a big deal out of everything, her mom said, exasperated. We wanted this trip to be relaxing, and we knew you'd find something to complain about. Oh, so you just decided to exclude me instead? Emma cut in. Because that's less stressful? You do realize how messed up that is, right? Her mother sighed again. We just needed a break, Emma. Emma froze. A break? From what? She demanded. From your own daughter? No answer. Emma let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Wow. Okay. I didn't realize I was such a burden to my own family. That's not what I meant. No, I think it's exactly what you meant. Another pause. Then her mother said, Look, we'll talk when we get back. And before Emma could say another word, the line went dead. She stared at her phone in disbelief. That was it? That was her explanation? Her parents had abandoned her for a vacation, because she was apparently too much for them to handle. And now, she was supposed to just sit and wait for them to return. As if nothing had happened? Emma felt something inside her harden. No, they had made their choice. Now she was going to make hers. In the days that followed her parents' departure, Emma's world had become a strange, empty shell. The house, once filled with the noise and chaos of family life, was now eerily quiet. It was as if everything had come to a complete standstill. But the weight of her parents' absence was still crushing. Yet beneath the anger, beneath the hurt, something else began to stir. Something that Emma hadn't expected. Freedom. At first, it was hard to embrace. Her mind kept going back to that text message from her mother, the cold dismissal, the dispassionate decision to leave her behind. There was no apology, no remorse. But as the days wore on, Emma began to realize something. For the first time in a long time, she was completely in control of her own time. No one was telling her what to do, where to be, or when to go. She didn't have to justify every decision or explain herself. It was just her alone in the house. She had always felt like she was living in the shadow of her parents' expectations, their rules. They had always imposed their rigid structures on her, expecting her to fit neatly into their vision of a perfect family. But now, without them around, it was different. She didn't have to wake up early to make breakfast, or rush through her morning routine to please them. She didn't have to deal with her mom's constant demands about her wardrobe, or her dad's sarcastic comments about how she spent her weekends. She could simply be herself, without judgment. For the first time, Emma allowed herself to breathe freely. She stretched out on the couch, flipping through random TV channels, not worrying about what time it was, or whether she was wasting the day. There were no productive tasks waiting for her, no projects her mom had assigned. It was just space. Uninterrupted space. By the second day after they left, Emma felt more comfortable in her own skin. She decided to take advantage of the time alone. She'd always wanted to go out and do things by herself, but she'd never had the chance. Every time she asked to do something alone, her parents would warn her about safety or lecture her about not wasting time. They treated her like a child, someone incapable of making decisions on her own. But now she could do whatever she wanted. She threw on a pair of jeans and a hoodie and grabbed her keys, heading for the door without thinking twice. The world was suddenly open to her, and for the first time, she was excited by it. Emma decided to start small. She drove to the nearby bookstore she'd always wanted to visit, but never had time to. It was the kind of place she could spend hours in, flipping through books, sitting in a quiet corner with a cup of tea. The bookstore was cozy and warm, and as soon as Emma stepped inside, she felt like she could finally relax. There was no pressure, no schedule, no one waiting for her to come back. She wandered the aisles, losing herself in the worlds on the pages, Taking up books she had always wanted to read, but had never had the time for. It was peaceful. The next day, she went to a cafe she'd always admired from afar. Her parents had always said the coffee was too expensive, the ambience unnecessary, but Emma didn't care. It was hers to enjoy now. She ordered a cappuccino and sat by the window, watching people walk by. She loved how the world seemed to be moving around her, while she was cocooned in her own little bubble. She spent hours there just thinking, but the feeling didn't last long. As much as Emma had enjoyed the freedom at first, it soon became clear that something was missing. Her house was quiet, almost too quiet. She found herself walking aimlessly through the rooms, looking for something to fill the emptiness. There was no noise, no laughter, no argument to break the silence. The absence of her parents felt strange, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow incomplete. She tried to fill the gap with distractions, TV, social media, books, but nothing seemed to work. It was as though her mind was constantly circling back to the same question. Why did they do this? Even though she had embraced the freedom at first, the questions kept creeping in. The anger, the hurt. Those feelings wouldn't go away, no matter how many books she read or how many cups of coffee she drank. She still couldn't understand what had led her parents to leave her behind. What was it about her that had made them want to get away from her so badly? Her mom had said, "We didn't want to deal with your drama." But what was the drama? She hadn't started any fights recently. She hadn't done anything to provoke them. She had been doing well in school, keeping her grades up, managing her part-time job. She hadn't been perfect. No one was. But she certainly hadn't done anything to deserve being excluded from a family trip. But maybe that was it. Maybe she wasn't enough. The more Emma thought about it, the more she realized how often she had felt like she was constantly trying to meet her parents' expectations. She had always been the one to compromise, to be the good daughter, the one who didn't cause any trouble. And maybe, just maybe, they had taken that for granted. She walked into the kitchen, where her parents' absence was most felt. The countertops were empty. No morning coffee brewing, no fruit bowl on the table. The house felt barren without their presence. She had never realized how much their routine, however frustrating, had shaped her own. Without them, everything felt different. For the first time, Emma allowed herself to think about what her parents had said to her over the years. They had always pushed her to be perfect, to be the daughter they could show off to their friends, the one who made them proud. She had tried, and maybe, just maybe, that had been part of the problem. She had tried to be what they wanted, even when it didn't feel right. The freedom she had gained over the past few days felt empty without answers. Without understanding why they had done this. Without knowing what had driven them to make such a drastic choice. She needed to confront them. She needed answers. But as she sat at the kitchen table, thinking it over, Emma realized that the confrontation wasn't just about getting the truth from her parents. It was about reclaiming her own sense of self. It was about no longer allowing herself to be defined by their expectations. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to be what they wanted. She was allowed to be flawed, to make mistakes, and to live life on her own terms. Maybe they had abandoned her, but that didn't mean she was weak. Maybe they had rejected her, but that didn't mean she had to reject herself. She had the power to choose what came next. As much as she resented their absence, she realized something important. This was her chance to define herself, away from the confines of their control. She didn't need their approval to live her life. She didn't need their validation to feel worthy. And for the first time, Emma felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years: hope. She wasn't just left behind. She was free. The weeks following her parents' departure had given Emma more space than she had ever known. At first, the emptiness had been suffocating, a reminder of the abandonment she had endured. But as time passed, the overwhelming feelings of anger and hurt began to settle, replaced by a quiet, surprising calm. Emma was starting to come to terms with what had happened, and perhaps more importantly, with the fact that life would go on, with or without her parents' approval. The first few days after they left, Emma had felt like a ghost in her own home. Every room seemed foreign. It was as if someone had erased the traces of the people who had once lived there, and she was left to navigate the hollow remains. But something had shifted during the course of her solitude. She had grown accustomed to making decisions for herself, No longer bound by the expectations her parents had set for her, Emma discovered a small, yet profound sense of freedom. She spent her time exploring new hobbies, reconnecting with friends she hadn't seen in ages, and even taking day trips to places she had never been able to go with her family. The loneliness that had initially threatened to consume her was slowly being replaced with a newfound independence. Emma realized that she could carve her own path, one where she wasn't constantly under the shadow of her parents' desires for her life. But the silence still gnawed at her. The lack of answers, the hollow absence of any meaningful apology or explanation. When the time came for her parents to return, Emma wasn't sure how she felt. She had tried not to dwell on it. She didn't want to fantasize about some perfect resolution, about a tearful reunion where they would beg for forgiveness and explain themselves. No, Emma wasn't naive enough to think that would happen, but she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to finally sit down with them and hear their side of the story. The doorbell rang one Friday evening, just as Emma was finishing dinner. It was a familiar sound, one that had always been accompanied by the bustle of family activity. But this time, when she opened the door, she wasn't sure what to expect. Her parents stood on the threshold, tired but visibly relieved to be home. Her mom, always so composed, gave her a strained smile, while her dad avoided her gaze entirely, his eyes scanning the ground. For a moment, Emma felt a strange wave of pity. There they were, her parents, the ones who had left her behind, and they looked like two strangers who had just returned from a long journey. The realization hit her hard. They hadn't been gone for a few days. They had been gone for months in the emotional sense. Emma, her mom said quietly, stepping forward. "Can we talk?" Emma stared at her, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. "What's there to talk about? You already made your decision." Her mother flinched at her words, but Emma couldn't bring herself to care. Not yet. Not after everything that had happened. "We didn't want to hurt you," her mom began, her voice soft, but there was a hint of defensiveness. We thought you needed some time away from us too." Emma's laughter came out bitter. "Needed time away from you? Is that why you lied about the flight date? You thought I needed a break from my family, so you left me out of your vacation?" Her father shifted uncomfortably, finally meeting her gaze. "It wasn't like that," he said. We thought we were doing what was best for everyone. We thought." Emma cut him off. "You thought? That's the problem, isn't it? You never asked me what I thought." Her voice wavered despite her best efforts. "You just made a decision, without even considering how it would affect me. And you lied to me. That's the part one can't get over. I don't understand how you could do that." For a long time there was silence. Emma could feel the weight of the words she had spoken settle between them. She wasn't sure if her parents were going to explain themselves, or if this conversation was just going to fizzle out into awkward apologies. Finally, her mom spoke again, her voice trembling. "We've been under a lot of stress, Emma. There were things going on in our marriage, things we didn't want to burden you with. We thought that if we could just get away for a little while, it would help us." Emma's eyes widened. "What? So you left me behind because you were having problems? You couldn't deal with your daughter because you were having problems?" Her mom's face softened, and she took a tentative step forward. "No, honey, that's not it. We didn't want you to see us like that. We didn't want you to feel like you had to take care of us. But we were tired. We were lost in our own issues, and we didn't know how to fix things." Emma's throat tightened. "I don't know what's worse. That you didn't think I could handle it, or that you didn't think I deserved to know." Her dad finally spoke, his voice heavy with guilt. "We failed you. We should have included you. But we just didn't know how to balance everything. We were so caught up in our own mess that we didn't realize we were pushing you away." The tears Emma had held back for days finally broke free, spilling down her face. It wasn't the apology she had hoped for, but it was something that made the pain of the past weeks feel a little more bearable. She wiped her tears away quickly, frustrated with herself. "I don't want you to think that it's okay. I don't want you to think that just because you apologize, everything is fine. You can't just hurt me like this and expect me to be okay with it." "We know," her dad said, his voice steady but remorseful. "We don't expect you to forgive us right away. We just wanted to tell you we were wrong. We're sorry." Emma took a deep breath, her emotions swirling inside her. Part of her wanted to slam the door in their faces and tell them to go away. But another part of her, the part that had always wanted to believe the best of her parents, wanted to try to find a way forward. I don't know how we're going to fix this, she said, her voice small. I don't even know if I want to fix it. But I'm willing to try. Few are. Her mother's eyes softened. We are, Emma. We want to make things right. As they stood there in the entryway of the house that had once felt like a prison, Emma realized that she wasn't as angry as she had been. She was still hurt, still confused, but she had a choice now. She didn't have to let this define her. She could move forward on her own terms, and that's what she chose to do. As the evening wore on, the awkwardness of the reunion slowly began to fade. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping apologies, but the conversation that followed, though painful, was the beginning of something. Not of forgiveness necessarily, but of a new understanding. Emma wasn't the same person she had been when they left. She had learned to trust herself more, to rely on her own strength. Her parents had failed her, yes, but they weren't beyond redemption. And neither was she. It would take time to heal, time to rebuild the trust that had been broken. But Emma knew that she didn't need their approval to be whole. She was already enough. And that was the first step in her own journey of reconciliation.